I've sunk dozens of hours into almost every iteration of Sid Meier's Civilization, starting with 1996's Civilization 2 and continuing with each major release since. Civilization 6 is yet another improvement on the classic formula, providing a 4X grand strategy game both for and spanning the ages. Games of Civilization are all about taking a historical culture from a single tiny capital city to an empire that often spans the entire globe, or at least the cylindrical alien planet that you start on. Only one of the map types bears any resemblance to the planet Earth. Once your capital city has the basics constructed, it's now time to build settlers to found new cities, builders to make tile improvements like farms and mines, and more focused structures to provide specific bonuses to an aspect of that city's future work. Builders have received a significant overhaul from prior Civilization games, primarily in that they are now limited use units. Default builders can only construct 3 improvements, and even with bonuses from civics, leaders, and wonders, it only gets as high as 9. I feel that this restriction is actually a huge boon to the concept of builders as a whole. The decision as to what they work on is suddenly weighty, since improvements now carry a very clear cost in terms of unit production time. It also avoids the inevitable massive worker stacks during the endgame, with dozens of units just milling around looking for something to do. One thing builders don't do anymore is build roads. That task now falls almost exclusively to traders. Roads are made as trade routes are established, which provides an enormous incentive to not only interact with this otherwise minor feature, but to trade with your opponents in order to gain highways for your troops later on. Military engineers, introduced in the mid-game, can also build roads, but like builders, are limited use units. The vast majority of the structures that cities can build are also now restricted by the district mechanic. Barracks can only be made in an encampment district, banks in a financial district, etc. These districts have construction costs of their own, can only be created on specific tiles, have extra bonuses based on the tiles around them, and are restricted in number based on the population of the owning city. I loved how this new restriction again made city management choices significant. Suddenly every city had to have just a few focuses, instead of all of them being jack-of-all-trades. I especially had to plan out which cities would become industrial behemoths for creating armies and wonders. Obviously I wanted my armies created as close to the enemy as possible, but wonders are now highly position dependent as well. Like districts, they now take up a tile all on their own, and that tile often has heavy restrictions on it. For example, the Hanging Gardens can only be built on river tiles, while the pyramids require a desert. Many wonders require a specific district as well. If there's one major difference between prior games and Civilization 6, it's that empire management feels like a much more significant part of the game, regardless of how far along it is. Of course, taking over the world is still very much a part of the game. Units are very expensive to build, and can't stack, so creating the right types and positioning them correctly is as important as ever. As other units will also impede movement, even the order maneuvers are made in can matter in terms of efficiently transporting armies. Before each combat, a display will appear indicating the likely result of the battle, allowing players to make an informed decision on if it's a good time to attack or not. Once cities have walls, attacking them with standard units is basically never a good idea, even if the unit's combat strength exceeds that of the city. For taking down actual fortifications, siege weapons like a trebuchet or cannon are an absolute must, while in later stages of the game, bombers are also quite adept at bringing down a city's defenses. While the AI, at least on standard difficulty levels, doesn't do a great job of defending itself, let alone attacking you, it does well enough that there is some true tension anytime you're at war. In fact, throughout the game, whether it's racing to get a wonder completed, or attempting to access a crucial strategic resource, or even getting the space race project done, you never feel completely safe. It makes every turn exciting, and the one more turn phenomenon is as strong as ever. There are a few moral issues in Civilization 6, starting with the restriction of a number of factions to being played only by utilizing a female leader. The large number of other available options didn't make this feel too obtrusive though. A bigger issue by far is how the game treats religion. It goes far beyond the cheesy religious combat, where units call down fire from heaven on each other. While not explicitly presented as such, the way that each culture starts with a chosen pantheon belief that can then be upgraded into a full religion strongly suggests that religion is simply a social construct. That you then get to add beliefs that have no rhyme or reason to them beyond mechanical benefits implies that the true purpose of religion is to benefit some ruling hierarchy. And the fact that you not only can found any number of historical religions, but make up your own as well, is a pretty strong statement that they're all equal. Now to be fair, I think that these decisions were far more likely due to an interest in making an entertaining and balanced game mechanic, rather than any specific worldview on the part of the developers. But at the same time, it's very hard to ignore the resonance with today's culture of individual truth, and humanistic tolerance. While it doesn't stop me from enjoying the game, I would certainly want to have a conversation about this with a more impressionable individual. The elephant in the room when it comes to Civilization games is the tradition of requiring very large and very expensive expansion packs to get a full experience. While Civilization 6 does have 2 expansions, they can commonly be picked up for less than $10 each at this point. They also don't impact the core gameplay as much as in the past. The core game by itself doesn't actually feel like it's missing anything. Another traditional pain point from the past is carried over into Civilization 6 as well: barbarians. Routinely cropping up anywhere there's currently fog of war for all players, they at least typically don't pose a threat to your cities. They also tend to stay quite a bit behind technologically, so as long as they aren't completely ignored, it's not terribly difficult to stay on top of them. Ignore them long enough, however, and if the Barbarian Clans option is enabled, they'll turn into an even bigger pain: city-states. City-states are minor AI players that have just one city, and their own armies. While they generally have no interest in fighting the main civilizations in the game, they do have the incredibly annoying habit of eating up prime city locations. These cities also tend to keep up with the state of the art in technology, so simply capturing them is not a very easy option. On the plus side, you can gain benefits by trading with and sending envoys to each of them. For better or worse, those envoys are the only way to gain influence with them. You don't have to bribe them like in Civilization 5. Since each competing empire is also sending envoys, getting the best benefits can turn into an ongoing race. The number of city-states, and if barbarians appear at all, are both controllable at game's start, so if you don't like these mechanics, they are completely avoidable. On one hand, there's no campaign, story, and hardly any scripted scenarios, at least without purchasing any DLC. Bringing your civilization from humble beginnings to dominant empire is pretty much the only way to play the game. On the other hand, there are many ways to achieve such dominance. In fact, pure military conquest is often the most difficult way to win. The wide variety of nations and leaders to play as doesn't add as much replayability as you would hope, though. Unlike prior Civilization games, each leader is locked to their nation, with no option to mix it up. And ultimately, each faction plays very, very similarly. The various unique units are often only relevant for a handful of turns, and the unique buildings are not that distinctive in terms of mechanics. That being said, the variety in how each enemy likes to interact with the player through their agendas does add quite a bit of unpredictability to the game. Another way to reduce the sameness between one playthrough and another is the shuffled tech tree option. This makes it so that while each technology stays within its respective era, it appears at a random point within it. You must now pick whatever technology serves you best at the time, without any guarantees that it will lead you to a specific ability further down the line, at least not directly. Ultimately, if you enjoy the basic game loop, Civilization 6 is unlikely to become boring. Even on the default Prince difficulty, where neither the player nor the AI is supposed to have any built-in advantages, winning a game of Civilization is usually pretty easy. If you play with friends, it becomes laughably so without using higher difficulty levels. As in history, technological superiority will nearly always win the day, and the other players don't seem to know this. They'll catch up eventually, but there are large windows when they can be crushed by just a handful of more advanced units. In many games, the easiest victory is a technological one due to this imbalance. The only thing that really slows down a stampede of simply better units is the advent of city walls, where nothing short of siege equipment is likely to allow a city's capture. That siege equipment is both expensive to build and extremely slow to move, which certainly adds a degree of forethought to attacks, if not making it actually more difficult. As in Civilization 5, the inability to stack units, at least for the most part, also means that careful planning is required when setting up sieges so that the correct units can be in optimal positions when it comes time to do battle. The two things the AI does seem to be good at are building wonders and spreading religion. If you don't stay on top of building a particular wonder you want, it's very likely it will get constructed out from under you. That plus the tile restrictions on wonder placement means that their construction has to be carefully prioritized. If you want a religious victory, you'll definitely have to contend with waves of religious units from most of the other factions. It's not unmanageable, and at least you don't have to declare war, but it does make that victory condition more difficult than it may appear at first glance. Civilization 6 is, much like the history of the nations you play as, difficult to score. While it doesn't have major pitfalls in terms of actions the player can take, the humanistic take on truth and religion forces me to drop it to a 3 out of 5 for morality. The only thing keeping it above a 2 is the fact that the problematic elements only appear a few times in a game. As for quality, it's really hard to say what I would change about the main gameplay elements. The new district and builder mechanics lend appropriate weight to every decision in the game, and the mainstay mechanics remain as good as ever. I do wish the AI was a little better without having to resort to effectively letting it cheat, so it falls just short of perfection with a 4 out of 5. Even so, when it comes to historical grand strategy, Civilization has still clearly conquered the world.